Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Nun lob mein Ziel, den Herrn, which translates to Now praise my soul, the Lord. We've looked at this chorale harmonization before, we haven't looked at this particular harmonization, but we've looked at this melody once in the past. It's a very long form, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the analysis and talk about the interesting tidbits when we get there. We have 3 sharps in the key signature. Our first chord is A major, our last chord is A major. I reckon we're in the key of A major here to start things off. We'll go ahead and mark our 1 chord there. We then have an F sharp minor triad, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is a 6th chord. And then we have C sharp, E, and G sharp, which is interesting because usually 3 wants to go to 6, but here we have 6 going to 3, this C sharp minor triad. Then we have D, A, D, and F sharp, that is a D major triad in root position, which is 4, passing 7th in the alto. And then we have D, G sharp, B, and E, that is a E7 chord over D, which is 5-4-2. We usually expect that to go to a 1-6 chord. We have C sharp, A, E, and A, which is our 1-6 chord. We then have some passing tones going on. We are in 3-4, so we usually have, at least based on what we can see visually, a lot of the harmonic rhythm's going to be 2 beats and then 1 beat. But there are several measures where we're going to have chords interjecting on beat 2. Just like this case, for example, we have D, A, F sharp, and B, which is a B minor 7 chord over D. That's 2-6-5. And then we have E, G sharp, E, and B. There's our 5 chord. And then we have our tonic triad in root position here, our 1 chord. But we have C sharp in the melody here, which means that this is an imperfect authentic cadence. And then looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A major as well to end the A section. We have another A major chord here, just a rotation of the bottom 2 voices. Bass leaps up an octave, tenor moves up a third. Other 2 voices are static with a passing tone in the alto, so no need to reanalyze here. Then we have E sharp, C sharp, G, and C sharp. That is a C sharp major triad in first inversion, and that's going to be our dominant of 6, so 5, 6 of 6. We get a neighbor tone in the melody. We then get C sharp, B, E sharp, and C. That is a C sharp 7 chord in root position, so that's 5. Actually, we don't need to reanalyze that. That's still a secondary dominant. We just need to put 7 here. Even more specifically, we could put 7-3 because this chord lacks a 5th. Therefore, this would be the appropriate figured bass. We then have F sharp A, F sharp, and C, which is our awaited 6 chord, F sharp minor, passing 7th in the bass. We then have D, E, G sharp, and B, again with another 5-4-2 chord, E7 over D, C sharp, E, A, and A. That's our tonic triad, A major in first inversion. 5-4-2 most often goes to 1-6. That's been one of the most consistent chord progressions amongst Bach's chorales. We then have D, F sharp, A, and B, another B minor 7 over D, which is a 2-6-5. E, E, G sharp, and B. We're seeing an identical cadence to the previous phrase. The only thing that's really changing is the switching between the tenor and the alto and the alto and the tenor. So there's some thematic exchange in there, some contrapuntal exchange. It's still a 5 chord. And then we cadence on A major in root position. And this one's perfect authentic because we have the tonic in the melody. Alright, moving along, we have a perfect authentic cadence to start things off in the B section in the key of F sharp minor. So I don't think we immediately go to the key of F sharp minor. It takes a measure or so because we don't get the E sharp until this beat here. So I reckon it'll happen in the first complete bar of the B section. So here we have another A major chord, nothing new, no need to reanalyze. We then have D, F sharp, F sharp and A. That's a, sorry, D, D, F sharp and A. That is a D major triad in root position, which is 4. A wants to go to 4. It is its dominant. We then have G sharp, B, D, and D. This would be a 7 chord, kind of like a passing 7. I look at these as passing tones, but it's pretty undeniable the fact that we do have a 7 chord here. But because of the bass the way that it is, and the fact that it's sharing a bass with the 4 chord, it is a 7/6/4. Unless you want to mark these as passing tones and just say this is an implied 7th, but all of the ingredients are here. Might as well just call it what it is. And then we get the chord that we expect afterwards: A, E, A, and C sharp, our tonic triad in root position. But then we modulate to the key of F sharp minor. We're going to call this one chord our modulation, our pivot chord. And when we go from 3, really I've found that 3, although it often does go to 6, it also goes to 5, and it really just serves as a substitution, a tonic substitution, so it could really go anywhere. Because afterwards we get G sharp, E sharp, B, and B, which is an E sharp diminished triad in first inversion, so that would just be 7/6. So the fact that we're going from 3 to 7 is kind of, I say unusual, but when we modulate via 3 chord, it really anyone's bet at this point, because he's inconsistent with where the chord usually goes. But we have some passing tones here. We have F sharp, A, and B. So there's kind of like a passing 4 chord here. I think there are a couple of different ways to hear this. I won't mark them as passing tones because the harmonic rhythm is clearly changing to every beat rather than a waltz style. We have F sharp, A. You might hear this as a tonic triad with the B suspended. And then the suspension gets interrupted by the changing of the chord underneath. Or you might hear this as F sharp, you might hear this as B minor 7 in second inversion, which would be 4/3. That would be a B minor 7 chord over F sharp without the 3rd, or sorry, without the 5th of the chord, because we have, B, F sharp, and A. That would be a B minor 7 chord without the 3rd. So that really does make it a passing chord. And because we're missing the 3rd of the chord, it's kind of like it's androgynous. We don't know its quality because the 3rd makes it major or minor. But considering the chord following it is C sharp major, which is our dominant, or even, it's C sharp major, C sharp, E sharp, G, and G, but it's in first inversion, so this is just a 5/6 chord. The fact that we have 7, we would really expect 7 to go to 1 here, but with this suspension that interrupts or it's not even really a suspension, there's a name for an upward suspension. If you know what it's called, leave it in the comments section so I don't go crazy. But we would expect the C sharp to complete the 1 chord, but Bach changes the chord underneath it, so we get, whichever way you cut it, 4 wants to go to 5, but 7 wants to go to 1. 7 doesn't really go to 4, and 7 usually operates by going to 1. So however you choose to analyze it, this is kind of an interesting beat. In fact, I would be tempted just to call these all passing tones, but I'm going to analyze the chords like so, and you can do with that what you will, but it's kind of a difficult vertical sonority to analyze legitimately. But regardless, we do end up going to F sharp minor intact on the next beat. F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A. That's our tonic triad in root position. We then get B, D, F sharp, and G sharp. That is a G sharp minor 7 chord in first inversion, 2/6/5. We then get C sharp, E, and G. That is a C sharp major triad in root position. That's a 5 chord. We've seen this formula before. And then we cadence on 1. And it's perfect authentic because our tonic is in the melody as well. Okay, moving along, we have what I hear as a half cadence, but if you've watched my videos, you know that some half cadences tend to err on the side, more so on the side of the perfect authentic cadence, And this is just one of those half cadences. I still hear E as the dominant here. Maybe it's because F sharp minor is still in my head, and we get D natural here, and we really don't get D sharp until we get the alto right here. But honestly, I'm going to offer the analysis both ways depending on how you look at it. I think both are valid. We actually do get a D sharp here, but it's naturalized here, so this feels more like a secondary leading tone, and this feels like a chord tone, a scale tone. So we have D sharp, A, F sharp, and B, which is a B7 chord in first inversion. So we would call this... Oh, before we do that, of course, I think we go to the key of A major first, right? That makes sense. We can call this our pivot chord. In the key of A major, F sharp minor is 6, and this would be 5, 6 of 5. B7 is the dominant of E, and it's in first inversion. We then have E, G sharp, E, and B. There's our 5 chord. Then we have some passing tones. We have like a big open fifth here, A and E, or open fourth, depending on how you look at it. Fifths and fourths are the same thing. And then we have D, B, E, and G sharp. So this is another example of a E7 chord in a third inversion with the D in the bass. And then we have, actually the more that I think about it, this D could just be signifying a secondary dominant as well, and we could have just modulated to the key of E. I just don't hear it that way. I hear it as a half cadence, and that's going to be my primary analysis, and I'll offer the secondary analysis when we get to the cadence. But here we go to A major in first inversion. That's C sharp, E, and A. So it's a 1-6 chord. That chord gets interrupted right here. We get F sharp, A, C sharp, and E, which is a 6 chord in first inversion, so 6, 6, 5, going to B major, B, D sharp, and F sharp. That's 5 of 5. And then we cadence with a passing 7th in the tenor, and then we cadence on 5. And I know what you might be thinking, Forrest, this looks a lot like a 2-5-1 in the key of E major, and you would be right to say so. We could just call this a 2-5-1 in the key of E major. So whether or not this is a perfect authentic cadence, that's entirely up to you. I think both are valid analyses. I hear the melody where E is still our tonic. And one of the most interesting things about the chorales is how how especially with half cadences, they will err on, they'll occur on the spectrum where not all half cadences are made equal. They're not all just cadences on the dominant. But what makes this half cadence sound more like a perfect authentic cadence to me, there are a couple of things. First thing is that we have the E, or the dominant, in the tonic, or in the melody. The fact that we don't have the fifth up here really makes this feel like E is our tonic here. However, with the chords that follow it and the progression that preceded it, this really does sound like a progression in A major to me, and the harmony, the analysis is just convenient to analyze in E major, or it looks more genuine in the key of E major, even though the melody and the harmony don't necessarily agree on a key center. But both analyses are valid, and in these ambiguous cadential situations, I like to offer both because I'm not 100% sure. And I think both points could be argued, so long as you're consistent. And my consistency comes from offering both and not taking a side. Actually, that's not entirely true. I kind of take the side of the half cadence because the melody sounds like A major to me. So that's the side that I'm taking, but it's not, I'm definitely open to being convinced otherwise. So after this E major chord, we have C sharp, E, C sharp, and E. C sharp, G, C sharp, and E. So if we were continuing in the key of E major here, this would be a 6 chord, so 5 going to 6 would be deceptive. But on the flip side of that same on the flip side of that same coin, 5 going to 3 is also a deceptive progression, just in the textbook less common, but in this case, I see 5 going to 3 all the time. So we'll call that 3 because I still think we're in the key of A major. That's just what it sounds like to me. and 3 goes exactly where we expect it to. And the fact that 3, it's not one continuous phrase. This is a new idea. There'd usually be a pause. We're meditating on this particular chord right here, where another chord following is the beginning of a new idea. So it's less about these two chords looking like they're related to one another and more like they're two separate ideas. But then that goes to F sharp, A, C sharp, and A. 3 goes to 6 as we would expect. Neighbor tone, more specifically a neighboring 7th, which kind of turns this into a 1-6-4 chord. But I don't need to mark that. It's not really functioning that way. We have F sharp, D, F sharp, and A. That is D major over F sharp, or 4-6. We have G sharp, B, E, and B. That's E major over G sharp. That is a 5 chord in first inversion. We then have some passing tones, F sharp, B, F sharp, and B. Another one of those sort of open fifth things like we saw up here. And we're getting ready for a really interesting cadence here. I'm going to analyze it one way, but it has a very different effect on me as a listener. E, E, G sharp, and B. This is just taking that same chord and putting it in root position, E major. And then we have A, E, A, and C sharp, our tonic triad. However, I'm going to analyze this as moving to the key of D major because we definitely have some type of cadence in the key of D here. Actually, should I say that? To me, this sounds like we're going from 1 to 4 in the key of A major. It sounds very abrupt, and the harmony does this disagreement with the melody. There's nothing in the melody that signifies D major. In fact, we have something kind of antithetical to the key of D major going on in the melody. We have B going to C sharp, and then B going to C sharp before we go to A. We're hanging out around the 7th and the 6th scale degrees, and we don't see a resolution to D, at least until we get to the melody after the cadence. So saying that we move to D is more so a concession of the fact that we have G natural here, and saying that A major, which is considered 5 in the key of D major, and then we get a little ornament there, a little neighbor tone, before we get 5-7 going on here to 1, looks a lot more convincing as a cadential analysis than saying 1 and then cadencing on 4, because there's not a label that I know of that describes that cadence, like authentic cadence or half cadence. This type of cadence, if we treat it in the key of A major, doesn't have a label, at least not one that's conventional. But if you are aware of this cadence right here, if we did continue to analyze this in the key of A major, we would just call this 1, and then we would call this 4, or we might even call this 1, and then we have 5-7 of 4 going to 4. That's what it sounds like more so to me. However, I say a brief modulation to the key of D major is also a valid analysis. Okay, the reason why moving to the key of D major might be relevant is because our next cadence is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor. Even though we get the Picardy third here, we're still in the key of B minor. B major is a distant key from the key of A major, but B minor is a nearby key. It's 2 sharps in comparison to the 3 sharps that we're coming from. Or the reason why I think going to D here is important is because D and B minor share a key signature. So when we get C sharp, E, A, and C sharp here, which is our 5 chord in first inversion, if we're thinking in terms of D major, we could think of this B minor chord, B, F sharp, B, and D as 6, is this little deceptive progression going on in the key of D major. And we can say that that's much a smooth transition from one key to the next, because D and B both share a key center. So whether this is just a tonicization and bringing D into the fold on a cadence introduces B minor, or if we are in the key of A and D is just being tonicized, it is a channel that B minor is introduced, or getting rid of the G sharp. Then we just leaps up an octave with a passing tone. Then we get G natural, B, B, and D. That is our G major triad in root position. That's 6. And then we have some more passing tones. We have F sharp, B, A, and D. That's kind of like a passing tonic 7 chord, but we don't need to analyze that because it's very brief. Here we have E, E, G natural, and C sharp. And as we're getting ready for the cadence, that kind of makes sense because of the fact that 2 is a predominant chord. Or I guess depending on how you look at this, these could be 2 accented non-chord tones, but it'd be very interesting to have this augmented second here. It's very interesting to have an augmented second. Usually those are frowned upon in harmony class, but here we are seeing one in the wild. So if we have E, E, G, and C sharp, that's kind of like 2, 6 diminished. That would be a C sharp diminished triad over E. Then we have F sharp 7 root position. That would be F sharp 7 in root position. That's our 5 chord. Before we get G, B, B, and D, which would make more sense as a chord that interrupts 2 going to 6. 2 going to 6 is an unusual progression, so if we see it, it's harder to justify, because it would be an example of one of those transitive progressions I was talking about, where we have one chord that wants to go to a chord 5th below it, but if you go to a 4th above it, a 5th above it, so instead of 6 going to 2, which is where 6 usually wants to go in tonal music, 2 going to 6 is moving the chord further away from the dominant, so it's against the grain of what the composers usually do. So adding this 5 chord here turns this into a deceptive progression where we get G major here instead of our expected tonic B minor. And then we have E here, E, G, B, and B. That'd be kind of like a little 4 chord, because E minor is the subdominant in the key. However, I think that F sharp, we don't really need to mark that. It's only one tone, and it's for a very brief moment. We have F sharp, B, E, and C sharp, this B being our accent non-chord tone, and we have F sharp, A sharp, E, and C sharp, which is our 5 chord, more specifically our 5-7 chord, because we have the E natural there as well, before we cadence on 1 major. It's very interesting to have the Picardy third in the middle of the phrase. We don't see that too often, even though Bach will often end his minor chorales in the tonic key with the Picardy third. So seeing that in the middle is unusual, but in a longer form, maybe it's justified. I mean, Bach did it, so it's obviously justified, but there's my case. All right, moving along towards the end of the system. Our next cadence is we have another interesting cadence where we cadence on D major, but I think we do so through A major, similar to how we get to D major here. Because we have E to A going on here, this is going to be kind of a strange analysis, and it kind of goes against my better judgment to analyze using a secondary dominant, but I'm going to call this B major chord. And it's very interesting that he uses B major because it's functioning as now the dominant of E, which is now our 5 in the key of A major. So I think this is an unusual case of modulating via a secondary dominant. It happens from time to time, but it doesn't happen very often. It's relatively unusual. But the fact that he cadences on major is also unusual. This chord is multifaceted. It's a Picardy third in the key of B minor, and it's also a secondary dominant of E, which is our next progression. We just have this ascending series of dominants, B going to E, E going to A, which is our tonic, A, E, and C sharp, passing 7th in the bass. And then we have F sharp, A, F sharp, and C sharp, which is our 6 chord, similar to the progression we started off with, 1 going to 6 in the key of A major. Then we have B, B, F sharp, and D. That is our B minor triad in root position, so 6 going to 2 as we expect it to. But we get G naturals in 2 of the voices on the next beat in the harmonic rhythm. So after this passing seventh, I think we've modulated to the key of D major, and we can call this 2 chord now our 6. We then have G, B, G, and D, which is our G major triad. In the key of D major, that's 4 in root position. And then we have C sharp, B, G, and E. That is C sharp minor 7 flat 5 in root position, which is 7 7, 4 going to 7 7. That's a usual progression. We have some passing tones, and then we have a rotation of the voices. We get E here and G here, but we get rid of the seventh of the chord, so we can just call this 5 3 here before we cadence on 1. And here, it really still sounds like the key of A major to me, even though I said that we modulate to the key of D because the analysis looks more elegant. This really does feel like this D major is not our tonic. It feels like we're cadencing on the subdominant. So I really do think we're in the key of A here in this analysis. I can go ahead and just say 7 7 of 4, 5 3 going to 4, because that's what my ear hears. I mean, we have 5 going to 1. E and A in the key of D major, we would need D afterwards to really make that feel like a complete progression where we were there was an agreement between the melody and the harmony, but it's like the melody's a little out of sync. E, A, D would be our trajectory tracing that cycle of fifths pattern, but E going to A just makes it sound like A is our focus. But the fact that we have a D major chord underneath it, there's definitely some conflict going on there between the melody and the harmony, which has been a theme throughout, right? Our half cadences or perfect authentic cadences, depending on how you look at it, have also had the same ordeal going on. So anyone's guess is as good as mine. Next, another one of those cadences that are kind of ambiguous. In fact, the entire third system up to the last cadence is filled with those phrase endings, those cadences. We have another cadence that looks very similar to the second phrase of the B section here, which I'm going to call a half cadence because it just sounds that way to me. We've never really lost the idea of A major, even though Bach is implying or in projecting a different harmony underneath it. But I'll go ahead, and I know we're getting a little smushed. This is a huge chorale to fit onto one page, so sorry the handwriting is small. But I'm going to analyze this in the key of A major, even though there's an argument to be made that we're in the key of E major. So if we're in the key of A here, we can call this D, that D major chord isn't our, the chord that I chose to analyze as our tonic. I think this A major chord is our tonic, so the fact that we have 5 here, we can now call that in the key of A major our 1 chord. We then get D sharp, F sharp, F sharp, and B, which is a B major triad over D sharp. That's 5 6 of 5. We know that B is our dominant. We have a passing 7th here, and then we have E, B, E, and G sharp. That's our E major triad and root position. We then have A, C sharp, E, and A. That's our tonic triad, A major, in root position. We then get B, B, E, and F sharp, but this E, and I'll go ahead and put imaginary parentheses here as if we were looking at a tied pair of quarter notes here. But we know this E is just a 4-3 suspension over the bass, and the even though 5 is implied here, it resolves to a 5-7 chord here before we get 5-7 or 5 of 5 that turns into 7 before we cadence on 5. And that's what it sounds like to me. But if you wanted to call this the key of E major, I think you're on the right track. I mean, you're on a completely viable form of analysis. We have 4 going to 5 6 going to 1. That already looks better. And then we have 4 5. The 5 chord turns into a 5-7 chord before we cadence on 1. The analysis already looks a ton better, but I hear this as E being our dominant still, and I'm trusting my ear more than I am just the page. But there are multiple forms of analysis depending on how you hear it. We then have C sharp, G, C sharp, and E. We have another one of these ideas where we have a 5 chord being followed by a 3 chord. If we were in the key of E major, this would be 6, the same thing I explained earlier. It's 3 because I'm choosing to analyze this in the key of A major. Afterwards we get F sharp minor, which is 6, F sharp, A, C sharp, and A, and then we get a passing D sharp there, which is still implying the idea of E major. So this passing chord right here, we kind of have this idea of D sharp, F, A, and A, which is a D sharp diminished chord in first inversion. That's 7, 6 of 5, and then we get E, B, E, and G sharp afterwards, which is our 5 chord. And with all of these D sharps throughout, it's really hard to continue to make the argument that we are still in the key of A major, but these just sound like half cadences to me. In fact, this second cadence right here sounds more like a half cadence than the first one because we have B in the melody. And the fact that we have 2 phrases here with D sharps throughout, it's indicative that Bach is clearly harmonically thinking in D major, or sorry, in E major, but really just the melody sounds like A to me. The fact that we don't have D sharp going to E in the melody, or we don't have really we don't have B going to E, we have E going to B, but it just, the contour of the melody just does not agree with the idea of the harmony being in the key of E major, and that conflict makes it difficult for me to analyze. So I will offer analysis in the key of E major when we get there. We have B, B, D sharp, and F. We're used to seeing this now. This is a B major chord with a passing 7th in the tenor. That's 5 of 5. And then here we get something interesting. We get C sharp, G, E, and E. So we don't get a 5, we don't get 5 following this, we get 3, and if we were thinking in terms of E major, this would be the equivalent of a deceptive progression, 5 of 5 going to 3. That would be the equivalent of 5 going to 6 in the key of E major, B major going to C sharp minor. We then have, here's an interesting chord and an argument for D majors. We have a D natural in the bass, D, F sharp, D, D, F sharp, and B. So this B minor triad is an argument to be made for the fact that this is a 2-6 chord in the key of A major. And then the fact that we get D sharp here is Bach's clearly just implying an ascending chromatic line, and this is all just counterpoint. As we know, Bach does contrapuntal things, especially near cadences. But D natural in the key of E major would imply 5 of 4, which would be like A major, but we don't have all of the makings of the A major chord. We have the A and the C sharp, but we never have the E or the doubling. We only have it in 2 voices, and I don't think that that's enough context. So we have D, A, C sharp, and F sharp, and that's an argument for kind of an idea of like a 4 chord going on here, but I'm just going to mark these as no, I will mark that. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's a 4-7 chord going on right here. This G being a delayed passing tone, or just an ornamental tone before we get D sharp, A, and C sharp, which is our leading tone chord. That's 7, 7, half diminished of 5, and then we cadence on 5. So the fact that we get the idea of 4 going to 5 makes this feel like a half cadence, but let's rewind and analyze the whole phrase in the key of E major, which I think is naturally going to look better harmonically, but it just does not agree with the melody in my opinion. And I know one could make the argument, well, of course, all these tones are in the key of E major. He avoids D, and that's what makes it kind of ambiguous, but we get the melody doesn't ever really tonicize E. We have A going down to E, but that's more so an argument for the fact that the melody is thinking in terms of A, and I'm guided much more melodically rather than harmonically in terms of what key we're in. In most cases, I had to concede some when we modulated the key of D major in these 2 places. Right here and right there, but this is an ambiguous analysis. So this C sharp minor chord would be 6, this F sharp minor chord would be 2, still exactly where we expect them to go, 6 going to 2. Then we have a 7 chord that's passing here, which is kind of interesting. We might even just, whether you put the parentheses around the 7 chord or around the 2 chord, it depends on what you hear. If you hear this as a passing tone, or if you hear this as the chord tone of the previous beat, and the C sharp is the accented non-chord tone, it's however you want to analyze it. And then we get 1. E major is our tonic triad. We then get B major, that's just a regular 5 chord, passing 7th, and then we get another deceptive progression, 5 going to C sharp, which is 6 in the key of E major. But then, this chord right here, I don't know how to analyze it. It would be B minor in the key of E major. So, would that be a minor 5? Who knows? I don't think so. I think that's too unusual. Bach has no reason to do that. That just happens to be the chord that occurs on the beat, but it's really just a byproduct of this ascending chromatic line. B, C sharp, D natural, D sharp, and E. But this chord really isn't analyzable in the key of E major, and is outside of Bach's regular harmonic vocabulary. And then we have D, A, F sharp, and C sharp. That would be like a flat 7. Which is also very interesting. So the fact that this passing chord right here is also not really applicable, it's more just counterpoint. I'm just going to put question marks there because these aren't chords that we would typically see. B minor going to D major in the key of E major, that's a chord progression that you'd find in some homorythmic chorale from the Renaissance. This is very unusual. So there's some disagreement here, and it's definitely very confusing. But regardless of that, we have a 7/7 chord here before we go to 1, and this is not a perfect authentic cadence. Then this is an imperfect authentic cadence. So whatever way you choose to look at it, I don't think there's one right answer. To me, it sounds more like A major. If anything, this A major analysis at least has ways to pick out all the chords, whereas this B minor chord is unusual. Makes me think that this D is a typo, but G sharp going to D sharp would be a perfect 5th, but D sharp going to A would be a tritone leap, which would be unusual for Bach. I wouldn't expect him to do that. But moving ahead to our last cadence, we're almost there. Thanks for sticking it out if you've watched the video this long. We have E, C sharp, E sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and C sharp. That is 5 of 6. Remember, I'm still thinking we're in the key of A major for all of this. So that would be 5, 6 of 6. We then have F sharp, A, and D, which is not an F sharp major chord. In fact, we don't get that resolution until beat 3. This is a D major chord, so we have a deceptive progression. This would be the equivalent of 5 going to 6 in the key of F sharp minor, but instead we have 5, 6 of 6 going to 4, and we've seen this progression in Bach's music before. But we have some passing tones. We have E, E, B, and D, G sharp, E, B, and D. So we have a passing E7 chord, which is 5, 6, 5, because it's over G sharp, and that implies it's in first inversion. And then we have A, E, A, and C sharp. So actually, we never get the full. I looked ahead too much at this chord and didn't look at the fact that there was no F sharp in here. So we never get the full resolution of the chord. We get a deceptive progression in its place, and that's totally fine, because the chord goes to where it wants to in the bass. What happens above it is up to Bach. Alright, then we have E, E, G sharp, and B. That's an E major triad in root position. Passing tone in the tenor. F sharp, A, C sharp, and A with a neighbor tone in the melody. That is a 6 chord, F sharp minor in root position. Then we have D, F sharp, A, and A. I think this B is a passing tone, and this is a 4 chord. And Bach is kind of alluding to the progression we saw towards the beginning of the piece. We had Actually, no, it's not exactly the same, but I feel like we've seen this progression before. I could be wrong. We had a lot of root position chords at the beginning. I think that's where I'm getting confused. But yeah, we have a lot of root position movement here and no inversions, which is not unheard of, but something that kind of sticks out to me. We have E, E, A, and C sharp. That's A major in second inversion, which is 1-6-4, which is typical of a cadence, having the cadential 6-4 there. We then have E, G sharp, B, and E. That is an E major triad in root position. And then we have a passing 7th here, which we'll just call 7 because it's happening on a numbered beat, not in between beats. And then we cadence on 1. Let me make sure I add this bracket as well for those of you who are familiar with that notation. We end on A major. Whew, that was a gauntlet of a chorale. I think this is the longest chorale that I've analyzed so far. And the fact that I did it all in one take, I'm very proud of myself. All in all, this was a very long form. I remember the other one being a long form too, which makes sense because they're both the same melody, so why one would be any longer than the other would be a byproduct of the harmony more so than anything else. But there were some huge takeaways from this. One is when we cadence on the 4 of the chord, yeah, it might be one thing to say that we've cadenced in the key of the subdominant, but it still sounds like we're in the key of A major. This melody has created a lot of harmonic and melodic disagreement, and I'm always one to be guided by the melody, which is why many of my half cadences are analyzed the way that they are. The tiebreaker is really how the melody sounds to me, and if the melody sounds like that, I'm guided to, or I'm led to believe that that's the key that we're in. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this piece. Most of the progressions function normally though, but all of that analysis in the key of A major at the end, there's definitely some weaving in and out. And there might even be a way to make it seem as if, we get interspersing of E and A happening at the same time here. But to me, the melody never changes from A major, which completely guides my idea. And when I say it never changes from the key of A major, I should further elaborate and say that it never changes from the key of 3 sharps. We definitely have some C sharp or some F sharp stuff going on in the phrase that we have in F sharp minor, but the melody never leaves the realm of 3 sharps, and that's why I have the analysis the way that it is here. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching the video. Thanks for sticking it out. I appreciate it. This is going to be a long one to edit, but that's okay. I don't mind. This is a really fun analysis. Thank you so much for continuing to support the channel as well. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.